Back in the 70s, heavy metal was not restricted to being just a genre of music. In case you didn't know, it was also a monthly graphic magazine for adults who had a penchant for particularly dark fantasy, science fiction, erotica, and steampunk comics. So it was only fitting that the magazine was made into a movie, and mind you, not just any film, but into an animated one. After all, what else could capture the surrealistic visions of the magazine's original art? If you ask us, certainly not a live-action flick for sure. Well, in order to keep the source material in the realm of the imagined, or in the part of the mind that can plan out a whole world in sequential drawings, an animated movie was the right choice. Aided by Daniel Goldberg, Len Blum, and dare we disregard Ivan Reitman, Gerald Potterton made his feature directorial debut with Heavy Metal. The visually stunning animated anthology movie joyfully embraced its R rating and received its due cult status several years after the film's release. Those of you who have seen the flick will agree when we tell you that it's bound to blissfully remind you of the days when not everything was computer generated. That being said, the rotoscoping technique of animation that's been used in the movie categorically happens to be one of the strong points of Heavy Metal. There's just something about the outstandingly striking visuals that are created solely without any restraints of imagination which cannot be put into words. It has to be seen, felt, and soaked in. I wish we could say the same thing about its sequel, which released as Heavy Metal 2000 after 19 long years, but we simply can't. The sequel was disconnected, and those who watched it called it a sheer nightmare. In today's video, we're going to take a look at both the movies, focusing on what went wrong with each of them. It's going to be an interesting analysis, and therefore we'd like to urge you to stay tuned till the very end of our video. So buckle up as we delve into the world of heavy metal. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin. While it's true that Heavy Metal features top-notch animation along with a smartly used soundtrack, there is no denying that many critics did state the film as sexist, juvenile, and dated. Let's look at the plotline, shall we? Mind you, the entire film is split into a cluster of animated short stories, each connected by a mysterious green glowing orb, the Lochnar to be more precise. Heavy Metal begins with an astronaut bringing home the Lochnar for his daughter. The green sphere melts his father and corners the terrified young girl for its own motives. Introducing itself as the sum of all evils, the malevolent Lochnar starts telling her an array of bizarre tales of its influence. The first story centers on Harry Canyon, a cynical cab driver residing in a high-tech, dystopian, and brimmed with crime New York City. Harry gets entangled with a damsel in distress, who's pursued by murderous brutes wanting the Lochnar that her archaeologist father had discovered. The second story is about the escapades of a geeky teenager who gets transported into the fantasy world of Neverwhere. There, he transforms into Dan, a muscular, attractive, bald man who is desired by many women. However, Den quickly becomes embroiled in a dispute over the Lochnar. Third story circles around Captain Lincoln F. Stern, who is a handsome but incorrigible rogue standing accused in a trial on account of several severe charges that the Lochnar tosses into chaos. In the fourth story, the Lochnar crashes into a World War II B-17 bomber jet that is limping home from a bombing run, bringing the deceased crew members back as zombies. As for the fifth story, it narrates the tale of a Pentagon secretary, Gloria, who is accidentally abducted by two stoned alien pilots. She later has an off-screen fling with their robot, and when it comes to the final story, it has the Lochnar crashing into a volcano on another world and mutating the people into an army of evil. It's only up to Tarna, the last of the warrior race of the Tarakians, who can destroy the Lochnar. You see, the thing about Gerald Potterton's Heavy Metal is that it isn't just a movie, it's a journey into the world of imagination, filled with strange yet fantastic stories. Back in the 70s, or let's say the early 80s, there was not much diversity, especially in terms of big screen animation. Naturally, if you were an adult back then with a penchant for animation, there wasn't much on offer that catered to more mature tastes. With Ralph Bakshi's directorial debut Fritz the Cat not widely understood at the time of its release, In 1972, Leonard Mogul and Ivan Reitman decided to step in and make the difference. In fact, Reitman entered much later in the process, and if we're not wrong, it had taken Mogul close to 2 years to develop the movie. During that turbulent period, he had seen his project getting accepted only to get rejected by 2 major studios, after which he even lost the story rights for 3 major illustrated works. It was only after Mogul had his animation budget doubled that he made up his mind to pursue the film's financing in Canada. That's how Reitman became a part of the Heavy Metal project, and with Reitman, in due course, bagging a deal with Columbia Pictures, he asked Potterton to be in charge of the animated film, which was a blend of science fiction, fantasy, and noir. At first, the script had Arzak as the main structure for the movie, but with Jean Giraud not giving permission to use his characters, it was discarded. This is what made Goldberg and Blum create the character of Tarna and the Green Orb, with fantasy illustrator and painter Chris Achilleos doing the character design for Tarna. Given that Heavy Metal was a mix of old and new stories, ardent fans of the magazine happily got to witness their favorite characters like Captain Stern and Den on the big screen. The opening and ending sequences were redesigned several times due to script rewrites, even though Michael Mills was engaged to produce them. You'll be surprised to learn that Reitman refused to pay because he was unhappy with the excessive costs, and it was only after Mills had filed a lawsuit that the matter was resolved out of court, and Jimmy T. Murakami was hired by Reitman to develop a fresh opening. Mind you, everything was done in order for the film to remain true to the magazine, and for it to really capture the spirit of the magazine, it had to be an anthology. And since Potterton had incredibly vast professional connections all around the world, he was able to put together what would grow to be the biggest animation operation in the West, employing over 400 people, all of whom had been associated with at least one big animated project by then. Since the movie was an anthology of distinct stories, each segment was contracted out to a different animation company in order to expedite production and meet Columbia Pictures' strict deadline. No wonder several animation studios located in different places, like London, Toronto, New York City, and Los Angeles, worked on the project concurrently to speed things up. And you'll be surprised to learn that Potterton assembled animators from 17 different countries for the production of Heavy Metal, and the decentralized production method was one of the main reasons behind the dramatic differences in animation style from one segment of the film to another. The only non-animated sequence in the film is the house explosion scene at the end of the movie. Due to a tight deadline for the film's release and the date moving up from November to August, the production team ran out of time and was unable to rotoscope the scene. Therefore, they chose to use a model of a house and filmed it exploding. Finally, to pull the movie together, Reitman focused on music, and the task of scoring the film was given to Elmer Bernstein. There is also no denying that Irving Azoff brought on board the best possible bands and songs. We're looking at Black Sabbath, Sammy Hagar, Devo, Blue Oyster Cult, Don Felder, and Cheap Trick, amongst others. However, it's quite an irony that a movie titled Heavy Metal was actually destroyed by heavy metal music rights. We're not sure how many of you know this, but the film was literally held hostage by its own soundtrack for 15 long years because of issues with music rights that were not properly secured for home video. Given that the flick featured over a dozen famous artists and bands, renegotiating the rights with each one for a home video release proved to be an excruciatingly lengthy process. The film was originally released on VHS in 1996, after Kevin Eastman, who had purchased Heavy Metal magazine, worked to settle the music rights issues. Given the $9.3 million budget, earning $20.1 million was a moderate success that still felt like failure at the end of the day. Somehow, the film satisfied no one. Mixed reviews ranged from cult classic to blatantly sexist. There were some who felt that Heavy Metal was a flimsy, opportunistic failure that was assembled with absolutely no love or care for that matter, while others were of the opinion that the film deservedly flopped, further calling it juvenile and dated. However, if you tend to look at the deeper problem, you will realize that Heavy Metal was simply trying to please everyone, but it ultimately failed to satisfy anyone in spite of its best efforts to do so, because each section of the audience came with their own demands. The teenage boys wanted sex and violence. Metal fans wanted authentic heavy music. Animation fans wanted quality craftsmanship, and critics wanted a coherent storyline. Safe to admit that heavy metal just got entangled while attempting to gratify everyone. Anyway, now that we're pretty much done talking about the 1981 cult classic, let's take a look at its sequel that arrived 19 years later. Co-directed by Michael Koldewey and Michel Lemire, Heavy Metal 2000, which was based on the graphic novel titled The Melting Pot by Kevin Eastman, Simon Bisley, and Eric Talbot, tried its best to revive the old charm with Michael Ironside, Julie Strain, and Billy Idol, only to fail miserably. Unlike its predecessor, the sequel was a direct-to-video adult animated science fantasy flick with one continuous storyline from one production house. Naturally, the viewers found it unappealing, both in terms of merit and nostalgia. And if we're being honest, fans of the original movie couldn't really take the whole from theatrical to direct-to-video transition. That's not all. The shift from an anthology to a single-story format was not well received by fans either, and the generic storyline of the film categorized it as an easily forgettable sequel. Additionally, the budget of the sequel was also significantly higher than the first flick. We're looking at a budget of $15 million, despite which it had limited release. Post the release of Heavy Metal 2000, a third installment was reported to be in various stages of development. Furthermore, it was stated that James Cameron and David Fisher would serve as executive producers, and that each would be responsible for directing one of the new movie's 8 to 9 segments. Many other names got involved. There was a point when Kevin Eastman, Zack Snyder, Gore Verbinski, Tim Miller, and Guillermo del Toro were all associated with the project, each set to direct their segments. Call it an unfortunate turn of events that Paramount Pictures chose to discontinue funding the movie in 2009, despite initially supporting it. And since then, neither a distributor nor any production firm has expressed interest in the second sequel. There's a high possibility that Paramount Pictures got cold feet because they felt the film would be too risque for the mainstream audience. 2 years later, in 2011, Robert Rodriguez declared at Comic-Con that he had acquired the Heavy Metal film rights and intended to create a new animated movie at the newly established Quick Draw Studios. That very year in March, Rodriguez was considering switching gears. However, that very year in March, Rodriguez thought about changing course and bringing it to television because of the very formation of his own television network, El Rey. Later on, David Fincher and Tim Miller expanded their ideas into Love, Death, and Robots, the ongoing adult animated anthology TV series that was released back in 2019. Marvelous verdict. It's only fitting to state that the original 1981 movie and its sequel are in a unique and frustrating limbo. The first film in particular is too iconic to be forgotten, and there's just no denying that it's also legally very complicated and creatively too dated to be easily revived. While the sequel did try to restore things, it categorically failed, earning the wrath of critics who called the sequel disconnected and enervating. Heavy Metal continues to remain a product of its specific time and place, a time capsule of 80s fantasy, sci-fi, and rock music that is very hard to replicate. Well, that's all for today, and with this, we finally come to the end of our video here. So, who here has seen both the movies? Don't hesitate to hit us with your thoughts in the comments section, and do let us know what is it that you love and hate about both the films. Also, stay tuned with us as we promise to come back with more exciting content. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.